Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar. It's been a little while since we've seen you, and this is our first webinar of the year, so I think I can still legitimately say Happy New Year to everyone that we haven't seen for a little while. So I'm going to run through a few things just quickly about Zoom and what our topic is for tonight. So I hope that you enjoy. So first of all, I know we've got lots of people on this evening and watching on Facebook who aren't so familiar with Brass Bands England and what we do. So we're a membership organisation for brass bands, and we're made up of over 400 bands, events, associations and traders. We're funded by Arts Council England as the sector support organisation for brass bands, and our activities include advocacy for bands, such as producing support and guidance over the COVID-19 pandemic, negotiating deals for members, like links with lots of different insurance companies, running workshops, events and training like the webinars that we've been doing over the last few months, and our stuff like our band safeguarding training. So if you want more information about membership or about what we do, make sure that you go to the BBE website and you can find out more there. So for those who are on the Zoom call this evening, and I think most people are pretty familiar with Zoom now, but some people might just be coming quite new to it. What we're going to do this evening, it is going to be pretty interactive, and we do want to hear from you. So there's a few ways that you can do that. So if you've got questions for the panelists, then make sure you pop them in the Q&A box. Or if you've just got a general comment for everyone, you can use the chat box. And if you have a direct comment that you'd like to get to me, if you're having issues with tech or anything like that, then you can use the chat box there as well. What we might do, depending on time and depending on how many questions we've got, is bring you in live to ask your question, so we can have a little bit of a discussion with the panelists. So be warned that I might bring you in live, so we make sure that we can see and hear you if you ask one of your questions. People who are watching on Facebook, we still want you to get involved as well, and you can do that by leaving a comment on the video stream. We've got a few polls and various different things this evening which don't feed through to the Facebook, but I'll make sure that we read out the options and leave your answers in the chat. So this evening is a collaboration event with the Brass Band Conductors Association, formerly NABBC. They've rebranded in the last few months to BBCA. We became partners with the Brass Band Conductors Association back in October 19, and it's been a great partnership for both of us. And now registration for the Conductors Association comes through our website, and we help them with the admin. And our wonderful members support manager Rosie also does lots and lots of work with the Conductors Association too. So we're going to talk a little bit more a little bit later on about the different things that BBCA can do to offer you as conductors at all stages of your career. But one thing that they do have that I just want to shout about are the area representatives who can help you out. So we're going to meet some of them tonight. They're going to come in on various things, but if you're thinking about getting in touch, then they are the contacts in your area. So as I said, Rosie is the main contact for lots of brass band conductors matters, and she's on tonight, and we'll be able to answer any questions too. So I think to get stuck in, let's welcome our first speaker tonight, who is the wonderful David Thornton, who will be leading the first part of the session. Hi Dave, how are you?
Hi Sarah, how's it going?
Great, good to be back on the webinar stream.
Isn't it so? It feels like we never left.
Exactly.
No, it's great to be here, and welcome to everyone on the Zoom call and everyone watching on social media. I'm here tonight in my role with BBC. I seem to be collecting roles with different organisations, but that's this evening's. And as you've probably just seen on the screen, I'm the regional representative, I think that's the title, for the north of England, the whole of the north of England. Sounds like a Game of Thrones title, but it's something I'm very passionate about is developing this. I've said this before on webinar events. Developing this communicative community of brass band conductors in this country, and I really do believe that the Brass Band Conductors Association really can go a long way to be doing that. This webinar this evening is kind of aimed at people that aspire to be conductors, but perhaps don't quite know how to get started, how to get involved. And maybe even people that are doing a little bit already, and there might be some little bits of information here that are useful for people that have done quite a lot of conducting already. But so we don't kind of presume anything. We are going to kind of start with the basics, but let's see where it takes us. And as Sarah's already said, there's a number of speakers that are going to get involved from different angles. So what I thought we'd do straight away is kind of define the role of the conductor, or maybe the perception of what the role of the conductor is, because maybe reality and the perception could be two slightly different things. Let me share my screen, and I should be quite smooth at doing this these days. There we go. So I'm hoping that you can see the BBCA logo in front of you, and there we go. So I got a bit of a quote. It's actually from a website called www.dummies.com, but don't read too much into that. And it's an article off that website called "The Role of the Conductor in Classical Music," written by Scott Speck and David Pogue. And the job description that they give us is: conductors are musicians who've studied every aspect of music. Most have been excellent instrumentalists themselves. They should be well versed in the theory and history of music, understand all the instruments and all of the musical styles, be able to break a piece of music down into its component parts, be very familiar with all Western music, and understand several foreign languages. Wow, okay, right, that's a place to start, isn't it? They go on to say they should also have a great ear, great people skills, and an effective baton technique. As if these requirements weren't enough, they must also have a detailed understanding of their orchestra organisation so that they can answer the countless artistic questions that come their way on a daily basis. Wow, I mean that's kind of verging on the superhuman, isn't it? Or all that kind of thing. But all right, that in some ways that's a pretty serious set of criteria. But let's break that down a little bit more. And when I was preparing for this, my mind cast back right the way to the beginning of the BBE webinar series, maybe April, May last year, and in a webinar that Philip Harper did. And I'm going to literally steal some content from that webinar that he gave, because I thought it broke it down really, really well. So I think it's great to recap on information anyway, but I shamelessly am stealing this from Philip. I hope he doesn't mind. I didn't ask permission. So he broke things down into two areas, as seen from the audience, the kind of base fundamental perception of what a conductor might be doing, and then on the other side, inside knowledge, maybe from the point of view of the conductor themselves, or kind of even what the players expect or experience. Yeah. So let's bring some of these things in. Wave arms around. Okay, I'll talk about a little bit more about these as we look at the list. Show where to start and stop. Set the speed. Bring in players in the right place, hopefully. Decide the interpretation, and be in charge. Sometimes that's a misconception that the conductor is in charge, but we'll go into that maybe a little bit later on. Now let's go over to the other side of the page, and we'll just break this down a little bit more. So the first one I've got here: ensure clarity to avoid misinterpretation of arm waving. I like the way that Philip has phrased that. That's great. I suppose we're talking about baton technique, or maybe even not baton technique, depending if you use one or not. That's a different conversation we won't go into now. Ensure musical and stylistic knowledge is thorough and up to date. This will ensure ideas for interpretation don't run dry. So look, this is a massive subject there. This could include lots of things, but really briefly, I mean, it could be listening to more music by the same composer. It could be listening to more music by composers of the same nationality or historical period. It could be researching the kind of, how would you put it, stylistic habits of the genre, whether it's jazz or march or fanfare or whatever, romantic. Understanding the composer's inspirations. Is there a story? Is it programmatic music? And you go into kind of traditional performance practice as well. You know, if you're rehearsing a traditional brass band march, there are kind of traditional performance practices, traditions of stylistic traditions that you might go into. If it was a different type of ensemble, there would be obviously other things. Okay, so I mustn't go into too much detail here. Use good communication skills. Obviously, these are not just physical, but definitely verbal communication skills as well. Here's an interesting one. Always seem confident. Now, this is a massive subject for me, and I could talk about this for the next half an hour, I'm guessing, but I won't. You'll be glad to know. I think it's worth saying that there's a definite difference between the idea of exuding confidence and that conductor that is kind of always right no matter what. You know, that there's a difference between those two things. I think if you exude confidence, it's okay to try things and it not be quite right, and then try it again. You know, it's okay to admit mistakes. Better not to make mistakes at all, of course, but it's okay to make mistakes. We've all been in a situation, or I've certainly been in situations where you know the conductor's made a mistake, but he won't admit it. Everyone in the room knows it. And also, there's a thing that's worth mentioning here is don't confuse confidence with the kind of authoritarian, shouting, angry school teacher. Again, that's something that's a little bit different. Confidence is the conviction of what you're saying. I don't think that shouting everything and being angry is always the best way. But I mean, again, that's a bigger conversation. So always seem confident. That's an interesting one to kind of discuss. Manage a diverse group of people. Now, everybody in the band's going to have different wants, different needs, different speeds of working, different skill levels, different social skills in terms of the strong characters, the passive characters. I think you've got to get to know your band. And kind of manage the room, knowing when a band is in the mood to work hard, knowing when a band needs 5 minutes of kind of light-hearted activity just to make the half an hour that follows that more productive. I kind of hope that makes sense. But managing the diverse group of people and those needs and wants can of course change night to night depending on all kinds of things. And I think this is the last one. Yes, be an excellent listener. And I put that in big capital letters because just like Philip Harper said, that is probably the most important thing that any conductor can be good at and must develop in a kind of conscientious, deliberate way. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, it can, again, being a good listener can include lots of angles, but one of the hardest for me is the practice of reading the score, putting the right beats down, the whole baton technique thing, and listening to what's going on in front of you. It's a two-way conversation, and figuring out how you can rehearse to make what's in front of you develop and sound better. That really does take a good listener and needs to be practiced. Of course, that's not the only thing that makes you an excellent listener. It's not the only angle that particular statement is getting at, but that's one thing that's worth pointing out. So that goes into a little bit of detail about defining the role of a conductor, and I think it's quite a nice place to kind of start this webinar. We're going to go straight into a poll. So if I stop sharing my screen for a second, Sarah, I think we're going to go into a poll, aren't we?
Yes, so I'm going to put this live now. So this is just a little way to gauge who we've got watching tonight. So for those on Facebook, the question is, who is joining us today? So would you class yourself as an experienced conductor, an occasional conductor, an aspiring conductor, an undecided conductor, a player with interest, or just here to listen? There are no wrong answers.
And as people are thinking about which category they are closest to, I'll also bring your attention to the Q&A box as we're going through. If people have got questions they want to type in, then please do so. That might be about getting started. It might be specific to your situation. Might be about basics of technique. Might be about things that BBCA can do. Might be we're going to mention mentoring later on. There's loads of stuff that and anything outside those subjects as well, actually. Just a reminder about the Q&A there.
Brilliant. So I'm just waiting for a handful more people to put in their answers.
Oh, it doesn't allow me to answer. That's a shame.
I'll be intrigued to see how you label yourself, Dave.
Player with interest, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. Great. So that's just about everyone. So I'm gonna share the results now.
Okay, great. So for people on Facebook that can't see these results, we've got experienced conductor 31%, occasional conductor 26%, aspiring conductor 17%, undecided 13%, player with interest 9%, and just listening 4%. So that's great. That's a nice spread. And there will be something for everybody as we go through, because we are going to talk about some basics. But one thing that occurred to me while I was looking at some of my notes earlier on is even if we are experienced, going back to fundamentals and thinking about our basics is important for every single person. If we're a player, we do breathing exercises, we do lip slurs and finger or slide drills, all those kind of things. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight actually are the kind of equivalent of sharpening your kind of toolkit to make sure that everything works. So relevant to everybody. Great stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And then just a few notes of people on Facebook. There's a range of people watching on Facebook as well. We've got some people listening while they're working, some full-time conductors, a couple of players with interest, and some aspiring conductors as well. So we've got a range in both camps, which is great.
Great.
So what we thought we'd do now is to kind of, as a bit of a nod to the range of people that we've got on the call, we thought we'd bring in some of the other members of the Brass Band Conductors Association to share a little bit about their routes into conducting and what that looked like, because we think that it's not one rule fits all, it's not one route fits all. So if Alex, Alan, James, Stuart and Garand are there and they want to join.
Evening.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Evening.
Great. So
good evening.
Good evening.
What's the plural for a group of conductors? Is it a gaggle? I don't know.
Gods.
Conducti.
Okay, yeah. So I think it would be really good just to hear from a few of you what your kind of drive was to become a conductor. I'm going to pick someone at random. Alan, what about you? What was your drive to get into conducting?
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question, actually, because I kind of fell into it at quite a young age, it has to be said. So when I was in secondary school, around about 15 or 16 years old, I had a group of friends who all played wind instruments. We had quite a lot of wind bands at school that were quite good, and they wanted to put together a wind quintet. So they were a bit concerned about rehearsing and everything. So I was kind of friends with them. So they said, would you mind just standing in front of us and conducting while we do some rehearsals? And that was genuinely how it all started with conducting these wind quintets, wind ensembles. And then my local band, who I played for, Bonacore Band in Aberdeen, when they then had gaps without a conductor, then it ended up stepping in and things. But actually, it was with those small ensembles that I started doing it just to help out friends. And actually, that formative experience, I think it was really interesting. I mean, without that, I probably wouldn't have done it for a long time.
Yeah, so a bit of a mixture of necessity and experience then.
Yeah.
That came up. We've had a couple of suggestions of what the plural of a conductor is. So Rosie says a score of conductors, which is excellent, and Julie's vote is a flourish of conductors, which is also great. So please, any other suggestions you have, please pop them in the chat. James, what about you? What was your drive or route to getting in front of a band?
Well, I'd always had aspirations to conduct, and obviously during a degree at Salford University, as many bandsmen do, you get an opportunity to conduct there, but I hadn't really done that much of it. And I was very much similar to Alan, thrown in at the deep end, although not quite in the same way. I was playing for a band, and we'd had our Monday rehearsal, and we were coming up to Christmas, and we had a gig on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and then it was Christmas the following Monday. And on the Tuesday, after we'd had the final rehearsal on the Monday, the chairman rang me and said, "The conductor's resigned this morning. will you do these 3 gigs? And I'd never conducted, and I was like, okay. And then I conducted 3 concerts and then started with them full time in the January. So it was very much a baptism of fire.
Yeah. So your kind of selection to take over, was that based on the fact that you'd done the Salford course, or that, you know, thought that you could take it on?
I'd done a little bit with the band I was in at the time, had a youth band, and I'd done occasional rehearsals with them and things like that. It could well be because I was baritone and they felt they could do without the baritone player rather than any of the others.
Yeah, I think that'll be quite a common theme throughout some of the comments that I've already seen. People who have been gifted, I'm going to use it a positive way, gifted a training band, and then that's been their route in. Stuart, what about you?
Very similar in the sense of the baptism of fire theme. I'd done a little bit of conducting up in Scotland before I went down south, conducting Christmas carols, or the joy of conducting Eye of the Tiger at the school's quintet contest. A highly intense piece, but anyway, I went to Salford and, like James, did a bit of conducting there, and went to go on to the conducting final module in my 3rd year, but just missed out. And I was on, here's a blast from the past, I was on themouthpiece.com, and I saw an advert for Greenfield Band needing an MD. So I went along, I had the audition, and it seemed to go okay. And they said they'd get back in touch. And then about a week or so later, they said, look, we'd love you to come along. We're going to do a bit of a trial for you to see how you like us, and vice versa. Oh, and by the way, in 3.5 weeks' time, we're going to Pontin's contest, and we'd like you to take us. So fast forward 3.5 weeks, I was standing in the nightclub in Pontin's, where the 4 sections held, with my feet stuck to the ground, conducting a 4-section band. And then it kind of went on from there, basically.
Yeah, definitely. What was that? That Pontin's, was that kind of your big first public performance as a conductor then?
Yeah. Well, apart from the Eye of the Tiger moment at the schools thing, I hadn't done a concert or anything prior to this, so this was my first outing was in Pontin at this contest.
Wowza.
So yeah, baptism of fire.
Yeah, definitely. A few of those tonight, I think. Parky, what about you?
Mine was a little bit different. So other than having a piano teacher who actually used to make me stand next to the piano and conduct shapes, just as a way of introducing theory to what I was learning while I was learning piano. I never did any conducting until I went to university, but I went to Warwick, where there isn't a music course, where there is a very good music set up for the students who want to play on an amateur basis, and there was a slot at the end of every year for people to audition to conduct the wind orchestra. So I had to go for that. And it was a brilliant way of getting started, because that you get feedback from the actual group straight away. So you stand there, you have your first go conducting, and then they tell you what they thought about your conducting. And that there aren't many times that you get that kind of opportunity. So I passed that audition, and then I conducted the group for the next far too many years, because I was at university for too long. But then I also started to conduct some brass groups. I then went out and conducted a local wind band for people that don't read music, but had picked up some playing. So again, that was a really good experience in the fact that everything I did, they reacted to, because they weren't watching the music. They were definitely watching the conductor. So it was scary, because they were so reliant on what the conductor was doing without that backstop of the music. But it's a different way that I came in from some others, perhaps, where I call it the semi-academic route. So I did have some support from the university teaching that was going on, but it was all free support for amateur conductors rather than people studying music. And that kind of opportunity to just get in front of a group for the first time is there at lots of different universities at different standards. Yeah,
definitely. I think lots of you have kind of had to learn the practicalities and the physicalities of it, I guess, on the job, really. It sounds of it. Garand, what about you?
mine's slightly different to a lot of the guys, really. I didn't have any academic background at all. I watched conductors who I'd worked under as a player in all different sections. And it was something I knew I wanted. That was sort of the natural progression, going from playing into conducting. But I had no background in it at all. Tried looking online. Unfortunately, there isn't many opportunities in Wales. I left Wales at that point and ended up trying to get in, but had the same, I'm very sorry, no experience, no chance. And even until recently still had that. So I decided, well, if I can't find a band, I'm going to start my own. So I couldn't start a brass band. I looked at it originally, but there was just too many in the area. So for me, I ended up starting a big band and learnt my trade conducting a big band, which was good in one way, bad in another. But it was sort of real baptism of fire of, okay, in 6 weeks, we've got a show at Notts County Football Club, or we've got a show 4 weeks after that in front of 2,000 people. So it was really sort of, I've got to be on my game, but so have they, which was really good. So I was then able to bring those sort of skills and standards into my brass band conducting now, which was really nice. But, you know, with no experience, I would have loved to have had the chance to, like, you know, learn something at university level and stuff, but it was never an option for me. So it was literally self-taught and then learn every single week in band and concerts and then fail at an area. There you go.
And Dave, what about you? I think your route is probably slightly different from some of the other guys.
Well, I think I was always interested from a very young age in music, which is I think was probably slightly unusual because there was no one else in my family. I don't really know where that interest came from, so even from kind of primary school, I was interested in what it was all about. I'd seen conductors on TV and all that, and just the idea of I started playing ukulele when I was 8 and piano when I was 9. So the idea of somebody standing in front of a large group of musicians and kind of controlling, I don't think that was a desperate want to be controlling or authoritative or anything like that. I think it was just you know, the idea of playing the band or the orchestra as a big instrument, you know. So I think that there's been an interest since I was very young. But I mean, as a player, I've been incredibly lucky. I've played for some great bands, and I've played for some of the very best conductors. And it's literally been sat there watching these guys work, and thinking, you know, wow, I want to learn from this. I want to try and do what they've just done and try and emulate that. I mean, I'm going to drop some names now, so I apologise. But I mean, people that influenced me: Howard Snell, Bram Tovey, obviously Bob and Nick Childs, James Gourlay at Fairies. I remember Dick Evans conducting when I was a member of the National Youth Brass Band. Roy Newsom from the National Youth Brass Band as well. Frank Renton, Peter Parks a couple of times as well. David King, of course, more recently at Brighouse and Rastrick, and you know, that's a great list, and so I have been spoilt to say the least, and so that's where I've learnt the most, just like Garand's just said, through observation, and also that's where the kind of energy and inspiration comes from watching these musicians and educators work in front of bands, and that's where that comes from. Before we leave this section, can I ask, and we've got the floating heads on the screen, because I think one of the things that we need to talk about tonight is stepping up to that first opportunity, because it's so easy to think, no, actually, I don't want to do that, you know, because it's initially or potentially feels quite scary. Did the expectation match up to the reality? Was it scary? Was it scary at first when you got into it? Not. I mean, I'm not asking anybody in particular. Has anybody got an answer to that, or?
I would say it was never as scary as it felt it was going to be.
Right.
It was the fear came before standing up, not afterwards or during.
It's interesting. I did a bridge climb in Sydney Harbour, and it was exactly the same. I was scared to death. I know this is totally irrelevant. Scared to death when you're putting on the suit. I don't know if anybody's done that. You put on the suit, and then they literally tie you to the bridge as you're walking up. And I was absolutely petrified. But once you get up there, it's fantastic. But very similar to conducting. Anyway, anybody else any experiences of that kind of thing?
One interesting thing on that, I mean, it was a very long time ago, so it's all a bit hazy, but one thing I do remember very clearly was the first brass band I conducted was my home band, who I played for. So stepping into the role of a conductor as a player was really intimidating. I do remember at the time kind of feeling very intimidated by the fact that my relationship with the players was as a fellow player. So that immediately, and actually I was quite young, I was a teenager at the time as well. So that was another thing, but I think when you're stepping into a band that you maybe don't know as a player, I found that always a bit less intimidating than certainly stepping in when the relationship with the players is one of having sat next to them and sat as part of the group. But because then the perceptions are different, aren't they? So that's something I do recall.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, well, sorry, go on, Graham.
Sorry, no, go on, Dave. Go on.
I was just going to say, I think that almost everybody has said that it's not, once you get on your feet and get going, that the focus of the situation, it means it's not quite that scary, or maybe it's the distraction of the situation, because there's so much to think about and there's so much flying at you that you haven't got time to be scared. Sorry, Garand, go on.
I had somebody tell me that if I was able to get into the band room before the players arrived to settle my nerves a bit, so that was really good for me. I got in nearly an hour before the band because I knew how nervous I was going to be, because it's my first ever chance to do it. And it was, let's see how tonight goes and we'll see if we invite you back next week. So it was really sort of, I hope the floor doesn't open up. Yeah. But once I stopped shaking after about the third hymn, I was all right. But it was a very strange experience, because no one knew me, which was great. But I think that takes the pressure off, I think, though, as well.
Yeah, and that leads on to something we're going to talk about a little bit later on, is the preparation, and that kind of getting into the room, and you're probably literally visualizing the band being sat there and how you're going to feel, and all of that is an important aspect, is being prepared like that. Yeah, great, cool. So
I've had a couple more suggestions for plurals. Conductors. So John says stickmen. Lloyd says a battalion of conductors. And Gilly says a shock of conductors. I think are all excellent options for me to vote on at the end. Before we move on to the next little section, just looking in the Q&A to see if we'll take one question now, which is from Alice, who says, do you need to be a better player than the band members to get started as a conductor? Anyone want to jump in on that?
Well, that's an interesting one. I don't think so. I think and people will come from this from different perspectives, but I think there's a certain element of education when you're working as a conductor, and so obviously knowledge about how people are playing and being able to kind of advise on air or articulation. I mean that was kind of in the definition right at the start, wasn't it? The knowledge of the instruments and knowledge of playing. But I don't think that necessarily rings true. I mean, there's the old adage about some of the best teachers are not necessarily the best players, and some of the best players are not necessarily the best teachers. I think it probably works for conductors as well. So that'd be my answer to that. I don't know if anybody else. Alan?
I'm in complete agreement with you. So I'm just nodding away from this side. Yeah, I mean, I can say I've definitely conducted bands with much better players than me. Absolutely. And I think, to be honest with you, it's a bit more nuanced than that. It's not about being, I think, getting the respect, if you like, of the players. It's not necessarily about being an equally or better player than them. I think it's showing that it's all about relationships. I think, it's all about, if you've got a good relationship with the players, if the rapport is good, if they can see that you're that you're prepared, and that what you're doing is coherent and clear, then I think your playing ability is much less of a factor than your musical clarity and your personality with the band.
That's a great answer. Fantastic.
There we go. And then one question before we move on from Emily, who says, I'm coming from a non-brass background. I play flute and sing, currently conductor for the University of York Brass Band. Did anyone else come from other bands to conduct? So Garand, I know you came from a big, although your brass focus came from a big band background.
Yes.
How does that kind of impact your move into brass bands?
I kind of did the study thing of, I still do this with brass bands now, but look at how bands play, like for a big band, for example, the standard and the tightness of a band, so to speak, which a lot of obviously top section bands, Grimethorpe being one of them, because David's cool, have that in. So for me, it was really nice to kind of bring other ideas into a band. There's that old saying, brass bands can't swing, which I think is the biggest load of rubbish going. They just don't, it's not that they can't play it, they just don't want to. So, for me, coming from that background, trying to get my guys to then play swing music, is quite nice, really. So it's nice to then bring other ideas in, which they may never would have thought of before.
Yeah, definitely.
I came the other way. So I grew up playing wind bands and first conducted a wind band and then moved over to brass bands more. And I would say the honest answer is that at the end of the day, it's all music, and the skills that you have as a conductor are about the score and getting the most out of it. Now, there's always going to be some nuances of the particular genre or how particular instruments work or what their capabilities are, and that's where your skill comes. But just because you've started playing in one and come to the other, as long as you've got those basic conducting skills, the ability to communicate and read a score and get into the music, then you've got the fundamentals to work with any kind of ensemble, really.
Yeah.
And I actually think, picking up what Alex said, I think the one thing that is never said is, whether you think you're right or you're wrong, just be passionate about it. Because if your players see you're passionate, they will follow you. And I think that's a big thing, because a lot of the time, somebody once said to me, your head's too much in the score, you're not looking at your players. How are they meant to feed off you? You're too busy looking at your score. So, just to be passionate, and show your passion to the players will go a long way as well.
Yeah. Brill. So I know there's some more Q&As in the box. Keep putting them in. We're going to come back to them as we move through the webinar. But now I'm going to hand over to Stuart for his section on a toolkit to getting an aspiring conductor started. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you. Hello to everybody out there. It's nice to be a part of this tonight as the Scottish rep of the BBCA. What I'm going to basically go over just now is a very basic insight as to what we actually do with one of these things. Obviously, there's been an age-old question of what is it that we actually do? Are we Harry Potter wannabes, or are we impersonating Zorro? In fact, the basics of this, of the whole idea with the baton, is something that can help just make the simplest things happen, whether it be, as Dave pointed out in his introduction, a band coming in together, or whether it be a specific instruction during a piece, etc., etc. The first thing when I talk about starting the kind of basics of beat patterns and things like that is how to grip the baton. There's two things that can quite often come up. One is if you grip it too tight, it becomes very rigid, and it seems a bit bizarre if you think of a nice, beautiful hymn tune and you're standing doing this because the arm is so rigid. And to be honest with you, it can become quite painful, I would imagine. The other thing, and anyone who's like me and has had experience of losing the baton mid-performance will know that you also must keep a decent grip of the thing so it doesn't come flying out your hand. So the way I would always look at it is to grip one finger, one thumb. and then wrap your hand around it. That way, you've got a decent amount of control from the baton for whatever it is you need to do. I'm going to go over some beat patterns, the shapes that we make from the front of the band, and I would advise or urge anyone that fancies this to have a shot. If you have a pencil nearby or anything that you can use as a baton, feel free to grab it and have a shot at this just now. I appreciate there'll be some conductors out there that are very clued in on what I'm about to talk about, but anyone fancying a shot, go for it. So first things first, 2/4, a nice simple 2 beats in a bar. One thing that obviously that's related to is your marches. Everyone loves a bit of slave burn and death of glory. So if I was to advise anyone to conduct in 2 beats in a bar, I would always look at one of the old-fashioned umbrella handles that come out and up, out and up. That way you're keeping it nice and clear on that second beat. Now, the one thing I would say is don't make the beat too big, because if the second we start to do this, we start to lose a bit of control from not only ourselves and risk losing this, but also from the player's perspective as well. So if we can come down and up, down and up, keeps it nice and steady. Okay, 3/4, the next one. I always advise people to come down and out. I have seen people try and do a 3 where they go down, in, and then try and come up. But I always feel that people are going to start getting tangled up in themselves should they continue on that front. So it's always down and out, up, down, out, and up. Keeping it nice and steady as we go through. 4/4, 4 beats in a bar. We're going to go down, across, out, and up. Almost like a cross, literally. So it's down, out, across, up. One of the things that Russell Gray swears by in his courses is on that 4th beat to imagine you're playing tennis. So you're going 1, 2, 3, and you're going for an underhand shot. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This way, all it is keeping it nice and steady, nice and secure for your players to come through. It's about not making it complicated in any way, shape, or form. So the next challenge is to see if you can do them and swap between as we go through. So we go down and up for 2 beats in a bar, down and up. Then we go into 3. We go 1, 2, 3. 1. Then change to 4. We go and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's a basic idea of what we do with the stick. There is another element to this, which is the left hand. Quite often, there's a lot of talk about what do we do with the left hand. One thing that's always spoken about that we shouldn't never ever do is to mirror, to do both hands, because what ends up happening is one side of the band can't see the beat because your other hand's blocking it. So there are various theories. You can pretend you are dancing with somebody and you have your hand on the small of their back. That way it's keeping it away from you and keeping it nice and clear of any collisions with the baton. But for those who are feeling brave, I'm going to steal a page out of the Russell Gray Conductors course, and we're going to try a little exercise if you fancy it. So as you're beating 4 beats in the bar, we're going to do a crescendo for those 4 beats with your left hand. The left hand is always going to be the one that gives the indications, whether it be play louder, play quieter, making a gesture for cueing, making sure somebody comes in the right place. Either way. This way, what we're going to do this crescendo over the 4 beats and then come back for the 4 beats. Back up, 2, 3, and down, 2, 3. Now, if anyone's feeling brave, what we're then going to do is we're going to go out the way in a second. 2, 2, 3, now out. 1, 2. This works on coordination, just moving the left hand a little bit differently to what your right hand is going to be doing. That way you've got that hand-eye coordination, which is obviously important. So you know what the left hand is going to be able to do something as you're keeping the beat with this hand. I'm not going to do for those of you who've been on a Russell Gray course, the square and circle coordination exercise, because I'll be honest, I can't even do that, and I've been on his course a few times. The key thing for starting for me is always about keep it simple. And as one of the others said earlier, you've got to be passionate about it. If you go in with enthusiasm, keep it simple, and make sure that you are just keeping it small, keeping it clear with the beat, you're going to be absolutely fine. That's been a very quick, very basic introduction as to what we do with the baton. I hope that's made sense. And yeah, I'll hand back to Sarah.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Brill. So we've got. I'm gonna see if Eddie is available to come in to ask their question. Just see if they are free. Hi, Eddie. Are you there? Okay, never mind. I will ask their question for them. So what do people think of giving prep beats? Is this just for the lower sections? Does it give too much time to players to be nervous and therefore anticipate coming in early? Any advice or guidance anyone could give on that?
Alan?
Oh, sorry, I'll stop jumping in. My personal view is it depends on the music, to be honest. I've been in situations where a piece is very pulsed driven, and a couple of prep beats just help to kind of get concentration in the pulse. But actually, I think when conducting a brass or a wind band, the most important thing is to model the breath when you're coming in. So I mean, I think 9 times out of 10 in the music, particularly if it's something more expansive and legato, just modeling the breath in with the upbeats is the best way to get the band together, that kind of thing. I think you're right in what you're suggesting, in that the giving multiple prep beats or a full bar or 2 bars just increases the risk of someone coming in the wrong place. And actually, it creates that empty space where anxiety can develop in those two with every preparatory beat.
I saw a contest performance once where a conductor gave 4 bars of silent beats prior to the performance starting, and I was sat in the audience and I was nervous. I just think somebody's going to play here. They really are. But I think with the idea that actually, because he'd started conducting, there was silence. And so there was. I think. I mean, it was obviously very, very prepared with the band. It gave the band the tempo, and it was well rehearsed. But it just struck me as something that was fraught with danger. I echo Alan's words. Imitating the breath and breathing with the band is so effective, and almost negates the need for preparatory beats at all. You can jump in if you like, but as long as they breathe with you, it's just like chamber music actually. When you play a brass quartet, brass quintet, and people breathe together. I've been doing a chamber music class today with some sixth formers from Cheetham School, and we're watching a video of Septura Brass, and that's exactly what they do, and they play together. So it's that's a key thing.
Yeah, it's the old saying, breathe together, play together, isn't it?
That's it. And it's amazing at all levels. And however many times you say it, players still don't do it. Anyway, let's not get into that.
We've got another great question, and quite a common question, I think, from Ian, who's watching on Facebook. He says, "I'm left-handed. Should I learn to conduct using my right hand?"
I'll take that one if you wouldn't mind. No, conduct with your left. Yeah. I'm a lefty. I cannot conduct in my right. I've tried. It's uncomfortable. It just feels unnatural. I've asked this question of my mentor. I've asked other conductors, and they've just always said to me, conduct with what you feel comfortable with. If you feel comfortable, if you can, great. If you're more comfortable with your left hand, stick to your left hand. Just do everything that Stuart said, opposite. Because as you were saying it, I was physically writing down, and I actually PM'd James and went, I think he means my right hand. So yes, yeah, it's whatever is comfortable for you.
I agree with that, and you know, we've only got to go on YouTube and look at the various conducting styles of some of the greatest, most renowned orchestral conductors on the planet, and you know, sometimes you think, what is going on there? You know, but the point is, those people are great communicators, and the phrase that Alan used earlier on, musical clarity, is absolutely important, and as long as that is achieved, you can conduct with a toothpick if you'd like. It doesn't matter how you hold it, or a McDonald's straw is the other famous one, isn't it? But as long as it's effective, then that's absolutely fine. The one thing I will say about left-handed conductors, and this is speaking from experience, when you're a soloist and they're standing in the solo, you know, just in front of the principal cornet, it can be quite awkward. Because it's for some reason it's just not what you're expecting. But I suppose that's, you just got to get on with it. But I remember doing I'm rambling now, aren't I? But please, Sarah, please stop me. I remember doing a concerto with a person that everyone will know the name of, who is also a left-handed conductor, and we didn't get in a tangle, but I concentrated for that 20 minutes. There's no doubt about it.
You know, no bad thing.
I regularly have my players say to me, "You're conducting wrong," and I go, "No, I'm left-handed. It's this." So yeah.
Well, there are ways of dealing with players like that, I reckon. Anyway,
McDonald's straws come to mind. Anyway,
let's move on.
Real. So I think now what we'll do is take a short comfort break. So we're going to have a quick break now. If everyone can be back at 8 p.m. and then we'll crack on with the next half of the session. So we'll see you then. Okay, welcome back. Hope you managed to get a quick break in before we crack on with the next part of the session. So as always, we're seeing loads of great questions coming in the Q&A and on Facebook. Keep putting them in the box and we'll be working through the questions as we go through the session. So I'm going to hand straight back over to Dave for the next part.
Welcome back, everybody. And this next little bit is about creating opportunities for yourself and how to prepare for them. So I've just remembered that I did a PowerPoint, didn't I? So I will share that, seeing as I... where is it? There it is. Talk about preparation. There we go. And Stuart Black is with me again, and we're going to talk about a few things. Can you see that on your screen, Stuart?
Yes, got it.
Good news. Okay, so creating opportunities and how to prepare for them. So we've got a bit of a list that we're just going to quickly kind of discuss. First, I mean, look, there's loads of ways of doing this, but so we've just kind of put some together as kind of ideas. But first of all, ask your own conductor if you can conduct a piece as part of your own band's rehearsal. Now, I mean, what do you feel about? What advice would you give if this opportunity came to a budding conductor, Stuart?
I'd say go for it. I mean, one of the things that we've found up here is that there's been a few actually youngsters, kind of 16 years old, maybe slightly more, have shown a bit of an interest over the last few years where they've asked if they can take a march or something fairly straightforward. And get that opportunity to stand at the front of the band. So much so. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say so much so. Like, there's I've got a non-contesting band up here in Scotland who now have a program where once they get to about 16, if they're interested in having a go, they can have a go.
Yeah, and of course, then there's no time pressure as well as that. It's not like you've got 2 hours to fill, is it? You've just got a short space of time, and you know you can use that experience. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I would think about the piece you want to choose. I mean, if it's kind of given to you, and it's got to be a march or what, then it is what it is. But I mean, maybe think about well, there's pros and cons here, isn't there? I was going to say maybe think about obviously something that you're comfortable with. I mean, don't choose something that you're not very comfortable with the beat patterns or anything like that. Do you choose something that band are familiar with? Do you choose something that's totally new to them? Because if it's totally new, I suppose you're ahead of the game in knowing it better than them. Or, you know, if they already know it, then I suppose it's easier to conduct. You know, there's kind of pros and cons. So I think choosing the piece that you're going to work on is probably something to think a little bit carefully about, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a severe risk if you pick something that maybe the band aren't very familiar with and is maybe a little bit complicated for the person to conduct. It then becomes a bit of an issue, you know, especially if it's the very first time. So yeah, I would agree with that. I think selecting the right piece is probably quite important.
Yeah, but something that you're comfortable with. And the other thing I'd say is be organised. You know, have a score well in advance. Don't kind of put yourself under unnecessary pressure. Hand parts out prior to the rehearsal starting, so there's as little disruption as possible. Because conductors and bandsmen, they're not very patient, are they? So little disruption. And then a bit. We touched on this a little bit before. Be confident. You know, first timers as well as, by the way, people that are standing in front of a band for the 1,000th time or whatever make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. So don't worry about that. And it's okay to try something again or ask for something slightly different, or even say to a player, is what I'm doing there okay? Is that clear? Or can you know? So you get kind of instant feedback. That's okay. And I've got to say, I suppose I'm relatively experienced now at conducting, and I do that with my bands. You know, I just it's okay to ask that. You know, as what I'm doing there, okay? Does that work? Could it be? You know, and I think that's okay. And just something I thought about earlier on when I was looking at my notes. It could be quite a kind of good political move as well to ask the conductor after the rehearsal for some feedback and advice. Some conductors do get a bit paranoid about other people taking the baton, so maybe a good political move to ask for some feedback afterwards. I don't know whether that's a bit cheeky. Anyway, Second one on here, organise a smaller group of players, quartet, quintet, to take it in turns to conduct. Is this something that you've experienced?
It's something that we've tried to kind of encourage up again over the last few years, because one of the things that's been kind of dying away is like quartet and quintet competitions and various events that involve smaller ensembles. So to give people the chance to maybe do that and maybe take their own ensemble is something I think it's a good learning curve.
Yeah, and it's a good situation to kind of experiment as well when there's not so many people in front of you, kind of try things out. We've been talking about preparatory beats and breathing with the group. It's just especially if the players involved in the group are all aspirational conductors and you get together purely because then you kind of feed off each other, don't you? So you can practice prep beats, you can practice breathing with the group, you can practice changing tempos, cells, writs, phrasing gestures, independent hand movement, keeping your eye up from the score, eye contact, and all that kind of stuff. When there's not the pressure of a mass of people looking at you, and getting used to the idea that it is. I keep saying the same phrase, a two-way conversation, and I think that comes from. It's great to prepare. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But the idea of conducting to a recording, which a lot of conductors do to kind of help prepare themselves, it doesn't work like that, does it?
No,
it doesn't. And so to get that kind of live interaction and the fact that the players hopefully are literally following you. You get slower, they get slower. They get faster, you get faster, they get faster. Or sometimes they get faster without noticing, and you've got to control it. And all of that is getting used to those things. So I think. Using and kind of creating this opportunity with a smaller group of players is just it's like getting your instrument out and doing an hour's practice, isn't it?
And so I think go on. I was just going to say I think there's a phrase that I've been told a lot, which is you never know what to expect on a stage, because anything can happen and I'm sure there's been many conductors have had these experiences, but it goes back to what you were talking about earlier as well, with things like that, where it kind of encourages the community aspect of it and working together to learn about conducting. So it makes it a little bit less lonely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in terms of material for these, obviously you can use hymn books because they can be condensed down to quartets and quintets. There's obviously quartet, quintet material that's specially designed, but there's also, I thought it was worth mentioning, Right and Round publish a set of books called Anthems and Occasions. I don't know whether you've come across these. To buy a full set is quite expensive actually, but I think you can buy just like buying individual hymn books, you can buy individual ones, and in there are pieces of different styles. So yes, it's great to conduct hymn tunes, but it's also good to conduct a march, conduct a fanfare, and in these books they are one-liners, just like they are in the hymn book. So that might be quite a useful thing to know and quite a good resource if you're going to get into that. Next one along, look for a conducting course that caters for beginners. Doesn't have to be brass band. So I'll admit I've never been on a conducting course, and I've never really been involved in one. So, but I know you have, Stuart. So, what might people expect? What might people look for?
The thing with conducting courses is that for a long time there wasn't a huge amount of them going around. And I mean, certainly speaking from the experience up here, there was for a long time there wasn't that. We did go through a period where we did courses where they were run about a specific piece. But one thing that it was actually Russell brought into play was the idea of courses that kind of cater for basically going back to the beginning. So how do you hold the baton? How do you communicate? How do you prepare? And the actual element of standing in front of an ensemble as well. In the last kind of 3 or 4 years, we've also started one which caters for complete beginners. So it can be somebody who's just simply interested in getting going and getting started. And it's something that we've found it's been found beneficial and wanted up here. Obviously, I can't comment as much down south and further afield because it's not something I've been involved in. But certainly, I think if there's people there to give them that opportunity to come and not only learn the basics of what you do with one of them, but also to talk to others and, bat ideas back and forward and get a bit of advice, maybe, because I mean, we all know when we're standing in front of a band, we might do something that we don't realize we're doing, and getting that feedback from somebody sitting watching can be a beneficial thing.
Yeah, and I know that on some of these courses, your time in front of the band is videoed, and then
Yes.
rather than kind of getting live feedback, you then go away and sit back and with your mentor, with your tutor on the course, you sit there and watch the video back. And that I'd imagine that's. I mean, I've videoed some of my own rehearsals for exactly that kind of self-analysis, for exactly that, and I'd imagine that's a very useful experience. I mean. Some of these courses, I mean, there's the short courses, daytime. There's residential courses. I know there's some wind band and orchestral courses that are residential. Some of them are quite expensive. I've looked into a few of them myself, but it'd be great. And the other thing to mention is some of the summer school, some of the playing courses, the brass band summer schools. As part of them, they have kind of little conducting courses within them as well. So it might be an idea, if you fancy it, to get involved in one of those summer schools and then get involved in that sideline bit of the summer school as well. So you kind of get 2 for 1 bargain there. And so but I think that would be a good thing to look for. And again, it's about going for it and just having the aptitude to want to improve yourself and find these opportunities for yourself.
It's amazing how much you can actually pick up that you don't even realize at the time. So, from, as I say, just simply speaking to people, not even the video part, but actually speaking to people and hearing what their experiences are or what they see when other people are conducting the band as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next one here: find resources for improving your knowledge and skills. And I know, I think Nick put something in the chat on the group about an American resource for basic band conducting, which looks great. It wasn't one I was familiar with, but it was great. Having just been speaking about Russell, we've got the Mesonoic Method, Russell's book, which I know is fantastic. Russell is the BBCA president. And I actually wrote down a bit of a quote from the website, which I'll read. This method is designed to help your ensemble, it's like a sales pitch, this isn't it? Ensemble develop a sense of togetherness in the way they respond to the music they see in front of them. It will help them cultivate a kind of hive mindset, thinking as one. And I know, having experienced Russell's conducting, that he's brilliant at that. Getting a group to think as one uniform way. I don't think I know many conductors that can get a band to play in such a uniform way as quickly as Russell can, and it's all in this method. So have a look at that, and I think maybe if the people on social media can share that link, that'd be great. And then another one that I know some of the BBE people that have been on webinars will be familiar with, written by Mark Heron, or devised by Mark Heron, I should say, the RNCM Conduct IT, or Conduct It, which again, they'll put a website on the screen there, and we'll get that shared for you. But look out for the MOOC, which is a massive open online course. It was recently, or the first stage of this was recently released. It's free. There's video references on the website. It's a basic guide to rehearsing. And in terms of example materials at the moment, it's mainly orchestral stuff. But I mean, look, the advice at this initial level is uniform, isn't it? It's right across the board. And so that doesn't matter. I know later on with that system, they're going to bring in some kind of specific wind band and brass band elements, looking at specific repertoire, and choral elements as well. I noticed there's a question on the Q&A about choral conductors. It is a different discipline, and there are differences between conducting choirs, orchestras, string ensembles, brass bands, wind band. There are definitely differences, we could talk a bit about those a little bit more specifically, but this is a great resource, and something that I know Mark is delighted with. So please go and have a look at this. It's pretty comprehensive. And so those two methods there. For people that are a bit more experienced, maybe something I've really enjoyed looking up is the conducting masterclasses by a gentleman called Jack Stamp on YouTube. Jack is the international composer in association with Grimethorpe, and but he's a fantastic conducting tutor as well. So he's a great composer. We're playing. We're not playing any of his music at the moment, but we would be and have done prior to lockdown. But there are some great conducting masterclasses. He talks about hand gestures and right down to the smallest nuance of this is about giving less and this is about giving more. Just the kind of intuitive, almost kind of subconscious difference between the upward facing palm and the downward facing palm, as an example. And he gets into specifics about some wind band repertoire, but again, the concepts are fantastic, and so it's worth looking those up. Okay, great. So some good resources there for people. I think we're going to bring in James as well at this point, and we're going to go on and talk a little bit about preparation. Is that right, Sarah? Or am I jumping the gun?
No, you're right. Just waiting for James. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Brilliant. Okay. Hi, James. Good stuff. So the first one we got on this list, preparation. Do you know what? I'm reading this bit now. The fact that I've put all of this on one line is almost ridiculous, isn't it? Preparation, know your band, choose repertoire wisely, and know the score. I mean, we could spend the next 4 hours talking about that. But instead, I've put it on one line, and we're going to sum it up in 2 minutes. How about that, James? Over to you.
Oh, easily done. I think that a central theme of what we've discussed this evening has all been centered around preparation. And I know a lot of people work on the 5 Ps, some people call it the 6 Ps of their prior preparation, preventing poor performance. And I think it's absolutely crucial to having success. I think you need to know your band. We've all watched Brass in concert and gone, oh, I really like that piece that Brighouse or Grimethorpe or Corey have just played. I'm going to buy it for band. And I think you need to be really, really careful about what you're purchasing, because it's great to have aspirations. It's great to get pieces out that are going to challenge your ensemble. But if you're going to put something in front of your band that they are not going to be able to touch, then all you're going to do is fill the band with a low sense of morale. And I think that knowing your band, knowing your players, and knowing what they want, depending, if you're not at the very top echelons of banding, you're going to have a massive range of people in your band, and you'll have maybe some youngsters who are really keen to progress and really want to play the hardest piece they can, the fastest piece they can. You might have some older players who have got a sense of wanting to just sort of solidify their technique and things like that. So I think knowing your repertoire, knowing your band is really, really important. And I think it's something that leads into the next one. Also, in terms of preparation of the score, I think, speaking to band's players, and certainly something as a player I wasn't aware of, is the number of hours that go in from conductors when they're not in front of the band. And proportionally, that's the biggest chunk of a conductor's time, is sitting there with that score, marking it up. Maybe, I know I like to play through the parts, certainly for contest prep and things like that. You might sit and play things through, but the more you know the score, the better you are going to be able to tell your musical story.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I remember Derek Broadbent, and I used to teach on a summer school that Derek Broadbent was the director of. And I was just getting into a bit of conducting, and he said, you must be, the one big rule as a conductor is be one step ahead. Be prepared, because all levels of players know the moment that they are ahead of you. There's no doubt about it, and I've definitely found that to be true. So blagging it is not allowed. There's no doubt about it. And just to go back for a second, so about knowing your band, yes, there's skill levels, but there's a kind of psychology that's in a band room as well, isn't there? And I think there's a question been on the Q&A about this. You know your strong players, know the players that will have some weaknesses as well, and you can kind of differentiate within a rehearsal. Allow those strong players to lead. Bring them into the rehearsal.
Yeah, of course.
Kind of allow them to shine. Give them their platform. Well, that's also a good thing for characters as well. So people have asked me about that because conducting. Bands like Brighouse and Grimy, you do experience some great characters And you know, how do you cope with that? Actually, it's great. You know, I don't. It's not as if I run silent rehearsals or anything. I know some conductors, it's like, no, we must not talk while I'm. You know, let those characters have their say. I mean, it can't get too chaotic or anything like that. But you know, I think that's absolutely fine, and it adds to the character of a band. Those individuals coming through, and sensing when a band needs that kind of moment of light-hearted, you know, for want of a better word, I don't like the word banter, but what you know, knowing 5 minutes of light-hearted activity means that the half an hour that follows that is going to be productive.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so about knowing your band and knowing the score. So you said it takes time. There's no doubt. It's a massive subject, and we can. But just to give you an idea, know what's on the page. The so kind of knowing the tempo and tempo relationships, knowing the beating patterns, knowing important entry gestures, dynamic content, expressive markings, research. You know, informed kind of interpretive choices, all of that kind of thing. I've got a way that I like to go through scores, and I put a score just here. I went and quickly found one before the starting. This is The Triumph of the Cross by Stephen Ponsford. I don't know if you know that one, James, but I go through my scores. The first thing I do is I have a general look through and kind of just decide over style, impressions, all that kind of important moments, difficult looking solos, just get a general sense of it. You've disappeared, James. Oh, there you are. I just get a kind of general sense of it. Philip Harper calls that looking for the ideal, just to kind of get a sense of what it's going on. Second time through, I'll look for tempo markings and beating patterns and get them marked in as well. I'll show you about that in a second. Third time through, and I'm talking about, you know, you might break the piece. If it's a 20-minute piece, you might break it into 5-minute chunks. If it's a 5-minute piece, I'll be going straight the way through. Third time through, look for, you know, kind of general shape, dynamic structure. Fourth time, you're looking for scoring aspects, solo entries, starting an idea of balance, lead lines versus accompaniments. And then the fifth time through, a kind of specific interpretive ideas, use of vibrato, shaping melodies, that, you know, maybe dynamics that aren't written on the part, interpretation of articulation details, what accents mean, what tenutos. I mean, it's an endless list, isn't it? But the point is, already you can see, you've been through a score 5 times, you're going to know it pretty well. It does take time, and I meant to do a photo of this so I could share it on the screen. But can you see that? I mark my scores up in kind of colour, and you can see some dynamics. You can see some beating patterns on the top. You can see I've emphasised some crescendos. Loud, it says FFF. You know, and so all right. One thing I will say is I always buy my own scores, and so I'm not wrecking a band's. With my coloured pencils, coloured crayons. That is one thing, but I do get everything marked on. And I know everyone that will have their own systems for that. And your system will be different to mine, but it is marked on, it is prepared. So as I'm rehearsing, as I'm performing, all the information is there, ready. I'm not kind of cowering over the score thinking, hang on a minute, the second baritone's got a solo there.
I think you're absolutely right there. And I know, speaking to quite a well-known conductor, I remember he gave me a tip. He said, when you get your score, it will be littered with Italian terms and Latin terms and everything. And he said, even if you think you know them, write down the definition on your score, because you'll have that moment in a rehearsal when someone goes, what does this mean? And if you draw a blank, I think it's really important, you know, little tells and little safety nets that, you know, that's what it's all there for. And I think little things like that will help you in the long run, certainly.
Yeah, good. So, I mean, I know we've spent quite a bit of time discussing that, but it was worth it because that, as I said, that is a big subject. The idea of once you've got all that information, once you've kind of done the academic bit, you've kind of studied there, just like a brass player, a euphonium player, a cornet player would do an hour's practice on their own. We spoke about a little bit about this earlier. I think you've got to rehearse, you've got to practice, haven't you?
I think you do, yeah.
And if that is with a recording, okay, that actually that's fine. All right, some people would say absolutely not. Why would? Because it's not your interpretive choices, it's not your tempos, it's not your transitions, it's not this, it's not that. Okay, but it's just practice. It's just a beat pattern thing. So that maybe that's a mechanical way of rehearsing. But as long as you kind of recognise that the experience when you get in front of live musicians will of course be different. But just as you would expect your players to have rehearsed parts, make sure you've practiced those beating patterns and you know exactly where they are. And sometimes you think, well, hang on a minute, this piece is all in 4/4. Why would I need to do that? It's not just about the beating pattern. It's not just about the kind of geography of the bar, is it? It's about phrasing. It's about shaping. It's about the idea of independent hand movement that Stuart was talking about earlier on. And all of that, it does take practice and time to develop and hone those skills so they are natural and habitual. And that doesn't matter. And that counts if it's a hymn tune in 4/4 or whether you're conducting, I don't know what, something with many different time signature changes. It's got to be rehearsed. I mean, what's your experience? Have you got any particular habits that you get into to prepare like that?
I think again, it's just that your time management is making sure that you know the piece. I think it feeds into what we've said previously about knowing your band, and it's about being aware that I'd like to put that disclaimer out there now. I'm not talking about any players that I currently conduct, but you might know that you've got a back row cornet section that will really need some cueing, or you've got a trombone section who will really need taming down and things like that. So I think it's not just the geography of the score. I think another thing as well in terms of you're asking your players to practice, it's stamina. Standing up and waving those arms around for 2 hours, that is a stamina exercise, absolutely. And I think it's really important in terms of prepping that. So I think it's very important, as you said, you're looking through the score 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and each time you're looking through it for something differently. I think we're all now certainly far more proficient technologically than we ever have been before because of the situation that we're in. And a number of bands now are producing social distance banding videos and things like that. And I wonder how many of those conductors have had that experience of filming themselves before. My band are used to, in rehearsal, having an audio recorder or a video recorder going on pretty much most of the time in terms of my own preparation. And I think being aware of, it's very well good conducting yourself in the mirror and seeing that mirror image, but I think it's a very different ball game of setting that camera up and thinking, right, well, if I was sat on second horn and this is what I'm seeing, would that help me? Is this going to be beneficial? And I think, it's quite something we'll talk about later in the mentoring program. It's a very lonely existence being a conductor, and I think it's very, you need to be very aware that you're part of a team and you're just a cog in that wheel, and you need to be making sure that you're thinking about what you think about what you want from them, but you've also got to think about what they need from you to achieve your coherent musical approach.
Yeah, thinking from the player's perspective. And I think that's absolutely vital, and it's good. I think it's great what you've just mentioned, recognizing that you are a cog in the wheel. You are not the wheel itself, because conductors don't make that much sound, do they, on their own? No. So no, but that's absolutely right, absolutely correct. And the last one for this kind of section: structure your time. And so I write myself, I don't always stick to it, but I write myself a timetable, minute to minute. I know if a rehearsal starts at 7:15, where I want to be by 7:30, where I want to be by 8 o'clock, where I want to be. And it means that I'm using my time effectively. It stops me talking too much, which is, I think, a common fault of conductors. It means that by 2 hours later, I've got done what I need to have got done, rather than thinking, it's 8 o'clock, I've got, it's 9 o'clock, I've got quarter of an hour left, and I've got 5 pieces to do for the concert on Saturday, which of course is problematic then. And in some ways, I'm a stickler. I rarely finish early, but don't like finishing late either. I always ask bands permission to finish late. It's got to be an extreme situation, but because people have long working days and sometimes distances to travel or whatever, and they want to get gone. So using your time effectively and planning that out. I heard a phrase: plan your rehearsal, and your rehearsal will go to plan. There you go. You can have that one for free. But I think it's absolutely right, and it makes us efficient workers. And you know what? There's no better feeling than feeling like you've kind of got places in 2 hours. If you get to an hour in rehearsal and you think, hang on a minute, what have we achieved here?
Yeah.
Or if you look at your watch and you think this is going great, and you think actually it's only been 20 minutes, that's incredible. It just means you're using your time efficiently, and it's good for the morale of the band because you feel like you're going places.
Yeah. I think it helps you maintain the pace of your rehearsals and speak to players that the one thing they don't want is a sluggish rehearsal. You know what? We've all had that experience. I remember a conductor that most people will know turn up for a rehearsal as a guest conductor with the band and saying, I'd like to work on the first 5 bars of this piece. It was a 3-minute concert item. And an hour and 45 minutes later, we were still on that same piece. And that piece, for example, had no percussion in it. And the percussionist was stood at the back of the room. And I think it is really important to plan your time. It's certainly, I know there's a lot of banders conductors who are teachers, peripatetic teachers, things like that. You will know as a teacher, if you plan your lesson, then you will get through that lesson as you anticipate. And I think it's really important when you're planning that you can't expect to achieve perfection every time. I think it's really easy to get bogged down and go, no, we're going to keep rehearsing this section until you can play these triplet semiquavers at the right speed. And it's just as productive to go, right, we've done this. You know what you need to do now. I'll come back to this next rehearsal, or you know what I mean? And making the players aware that you're not expecting perfection from them instantly is really important. And a plan will help you stick to that.
Absolutely. And I think it's worth mentioning at this point that just think about why your players come to band as well. And it's if you're that percussion player that stood at the back for an hour and 45 minutes on their phone, you can go on Facebook at home, and it just means that they don't necessarily fancy coming to the next rehearsal. Where actually the ideal situation is people leave at the end of 2 hours thinking, I can't wait till Thursday. Yeah, and that's the important thing. Cool. I really enjoyed that. Thanks, James. Thanks, Stuart.
Real, thanks.
Yeah, I did. I'm happy to talk for it.
So just to pick up on a couple of things that are going on in the Zoom chat for the benefit of people watching on Facebook. So a couple of people have asked about ideas to infuse your band back into banding during the pandemic. So I'd recommend that you go back and watch the first webinar that we delivered with the Brass Band Conductors Association, which is called Keep Calm and Carry On Banding. And there's lots of great tips in there from the team about ideas of what to do. So I will make sure that goes into the Facebook chat as well. And then also a couple of recommendations to seek out TED Talks on different conducting methods, and just tons and tons of resources there available to find. Great. So now I think we're going to move on to talking a little bit about the Brass Band Conductors Association mentoring program. So James and Garand, I think over to you.
Hello.
Thank you very much. I know we're due to finish this slot at 8:30, so we will travel back in time as part of our presentation. We're going to start, I think, by firstly, I'd just like to dispel a few sort of common myths, I think, regarding the mentoring program. I think sometimes people think what the mentoring program is not is conducting lessons. I think what it is not is someone who's going to come in and fix all your issues. It's an awareness that, as we said previously, that conducting can be a very, very lonely experience. And I think it's really important to be aware that the Brass Band Conductors Association offers a network. It's an opportunity to meet, to be aware, to build relationships with other conductors, with people to bounce ideas off. And I think it's really, when you go into this mentoring program, It's not going to give you all the answers. You're not going to have a personal mentor that holds your hand in every rehearsal for the next 3 years. It's a very personalised programme to what the requirements are and what the offering of the association is. And to that end, I know Sarah said we've got a poll that we were going to ask about what people were looking for in terms of what they would like guidance or support with in their role as a conductor. Can we do that poll now?
Yes, so I will launch
Amazing.
that right now. So again, for the benefit of people on Facebook, again, if you put any of your answers into the chat, what support would you like as a guidance or support as your role as a conductor? Is it technique, rehearsal planning, programming, contest preparation, people management, something that's been mentioned in the chat a few times this evening, company and not being so isolated, or a network for support. So people on Facebook would love to hear what guidance and support you would like as well. So I'll just wait for a few more people to fill out the poll before I share it. Brill. Okay, I'm going to end that now for us to share. Great.
Right, a really even spread.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, this is great that we're looking at there. You know, as we can see, 27% of people were looking at technique, 7% on rehearsal planning, 15% on programming, 12% on preparation for contests, 17% on people management, 5% on company or less isolation, and 17% on network for support. And I think a lot of people, if they could have selected more than one answer there, that would have definitely been an option for a lot of people. And I think it's important that we're aware of what we can and can't offer. So in terms of the mentoring program, the way that works is, as members get in touch with the executive committee, and we say, right, we're looking at what can be offered. Now, what that then in turn will do is those members will be contacted. They'll be put in contact first and foremost with their regional representative. I know the names of those regional representatives are featured on the website and were featured at the start of this presentation. And then it will be down to the individuals to then have a discussion and have a conversation and say, this is what I'm looking to get out of it. This is what I'm willing to offer. And I think, like I say, the fundamental of what we're trying to do there is the idea of trying to unisolate or stop conductors feeling so isolated and having these ideas to bounce off. And I know it's wonderful that we've had people commenting, saying they're coming from different backgrounds. I was, in terms of giving you some real life experience, I was contacted by Garand, and we were having a chat about the mentoring program and what it involved and things like that. And quite frankly, he just said, would you mentor me? And we had a discussion. It was absolutely yes, we can. Now, obviously, we're living in very different times right now, and it's not a case of how the mentoring program might run when we're back to full functionality, hopefully very soon. We hope that we can do that. So it is very much a conversation now. It's building those relationships. I know, as Garand said, he came from a sort of big band in, and I'm sure don't mind me saying, one of the first conversations we had, he said, I've got this really good idea for a program. And then he showed me this list of like 25, 30 pieces. And I was like, it's a bit much. And it can just be practicalities like that. And I think, so sort of, Garand, when you were approached the association in terms of mentoring, what is it that you were looking for there?
I think a lot of it for me really was not really knowing, but because I didn't have the background, really, my biggest thing was turning up every week, pardon the expression, waving my arms around and not really knowing what I was doing. I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve, but I didn't really know how to prep, how to do my rehearsal timings, anything really. But then every week I've got to portray that to a band. And it was the most scariest thing in the world. And like you said, so to give everybody a bit of a background, out of banding, I work as an entertainer. I work on the 1940s vintage scene. So a 45-minute concert, well, an hour's concert in a band, two 45-minute halves would be sort of 7 to 8 pieces per half for a brass band. For an entertainer, that's 30 to 40 songs. So when I was planning my concerts, I would say to my band, right, here we go. We've got a concert on Saturday. We're doing 10 songs, 15 to 20 songs in the first half, 25 in the second half. because to me that was 45 minutes time-wise, not anything else. And yeah, I remember your reaction to this day of, you what? No, it's this. And it took me a long
Very
time
much so.
to change that mindset in me of, well, I can just do 7 songs. That's like 20 minutes in my normal show. You know, so it was really strange, but it was.
I know. I mean, I think if we want to go into full detail there, it was 30 pieces, including 2 test pieces.
Well,
So
you know, they said they wanted to learn.
Garand, he's absolutely, and he's right there. So, you know, it can just be fundamentals of, you know, Garand has sent me on a couple of occasions programs saying, you know, what do you think of this? This might be for an entertainment contest. It might be for looking at, you know, have you heard this test piece? Can you give me your opinion on this test piece that we're thinking about for this contest? It might be that we're looking at this set of concert programming. And I think what we need to be very aware of as an association is we have not, we're not giving a prescriptive, if you sign up for the mentoring program, you will get this, 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 and this, and then we'll pop you on your way and you'll be the world's greatest conductor. It's a very personalized process. It could be, the mentoring program for some could be 1 phone call and just having a conversation with people. It could be a series of phone calls. It might be that your mentor or you decide to meet and do a Zoom call or something like that. They're all different possibilities about what the mentoring can be. And I think it's really important that people are aware what the fundamental process here is, realizing that we are a community and it's a support network. And, you know, conductors are not on their own. And, you know, conductors go to band rehearsals to enjoy themselves just like the players do. And you're there to lead that group with your musical vision. And I think it's very important that, you know, we all know, you know, in football, there is the League Managers Association, and they are aware that they are a collegiate group of people. And it might be that they are having conversations about different ideas and things like that. Now, obviously, you're going to be competing against these people at time, but for 95% of the time, we've all got that common goal of, we love brass bands and we love music, and we want to share that with players and with audiences and the like. And I think it's really important to be aware that as an association, what we're trying to do is support those people that want to be conductors. Because I think from the start of the webinar, when we were saying, oh, we're thrown at the deep end, we were doing this, people are asking, where can I go for this? Where can I go from that? As an association, the Brass Band Conductors Association have got this amazing partnership with BBE, and together we are there to support our movement. So we're not there to cast aspersions or to judge. And if you want some support and say, you know, it could be something that I'd really like some support with this piece because I'm really struggling with the transitions of beat patterns or things like that. And I think it's not a weakness to admit that you're struggling.
I mean, James, I think that.
And I think, you know, it's. Yeah.
I think that's a fair point, because I mean, one of the biggest pieces that I had, obviously, I come to you for a lot of advice on, look, I've got this, what do you think of this, and all that. More for my own peace of mind, because, like you said, I've heard pieces of brass in concert, and both pieces, knowing every right my band will never play them, but I've got them because I want to push myself as a conductor to learn those pieces. Now, my biggest thing I've done with my band was I took them to the area contest. We played Neverland at the Christopher Bond. Now, okay, I broke every rule in the process of I learned it from the CD, because, and I will big enough person to hold my hand up in front of all these people, and I know my band members are watching as well, I was scared, because to me, it was the biggest thing I'd ever done as a conductor. You know, I'm taking my band onto a stage in Swansea where they hadn't been in 10 plus years, and I didn't want to make a fool of them or myself. But it was more of I'll have a listen through, and then, like, you gave me some very simple advice of something I hadn't thought of was number your bars. And I told my players to do the same. And I sat down and worked through the score of it. I actually had it here next to me, funnily enough, because I've been reading it tonight. And the difference between what was on that CD and what we then produced was chalk and cheese. We then invited the Christopher Bond into rehearsal, and he said to me, and I never understood this, but he said to me, it's great you've got your vision of this piece, but I would always take this section faster and this section faster. I said to him, well, if you wanted it faster, why didn't you write it faster? Because to me, it made no sense. But it was little things of a confidence boost more for me, really, of I don't understand this. This is what I want to achieve. This is how I'm thinking of doing it. Am I in the right sort of space, or is this okay to do? Because, like you say, as a conductor, we walk into that band room and we are on our own. Every player around them, we've got other players to ask for help. They ask their MD. If the committee don't know something, or they got people to ask. As an MD, you're stood there with the world on your shoulders, thinking, right, I've now got to show these guys that I know this piece brilliantly, and if I don't, I'm going to get found out. And for me, being part of this
you're
mentorship
right
has
there,
been
and I
brilliant.
think it is important. Yeah, I think it is important, the points that you're raising there, and I think you've latched on something really nice there, in the fact that when you were talking to Chris and he said, "Oh, I do it like this," and you said, "Well, why don't you write it like that?" And I think this is really important, that you're not going to come to the association, or to anyone for that matter, and say, well, how should I do this? If we're talking in terms of contest, how should I do this piece in terms of what do I need to do to win this contest?
Yeah.
Because no one, not another conductor, not a composer, not an adjudicator, they don't have a predefined, this is the boxes you must tick to win. This is how you must do it at this speed. What people want, what an audience, an adjudicator wants, is they want to be taken on a musical journey. And if your musical journey is convincing, then you will convince them and take them on that journey with you. So I think, I'm aware of timing now, that it is fundamentally, as I keep saying, it is a support network. It's about tossing ideas around. And I think, without wanting to get too sort of emotional about this, Garand was my mentee, I was his mentor. He's quite firmly now my friend, and we have conversations about band and conducting that might be beneficial to both of us at times. It might not be, but it's just part of having a conversation with your friend. And I think, this again goes to the fact, we're living in a world of thinking about well-being and the well-being of our players, but the well-being of conductors is we don't want them to be alone. So this is where we would absolutely say to people, go towards the website, have a look at the guide, and look at how to find a mentor, look at how you can become part of this association, because it's definitely worth it. And I think that wraps us up.
Yeah, completely agree.
Thank you so much, James. I think that encapsulates it really, really nicely. And what's so amazing about what the work that the Conductors Association is doing is that you really create a community, and in work that you do is so isolated, and actually it's so important to be together and work together, particularly in the pandemic, but outside of that as well. And that's brilliant that is happening, and there's such a great team behind it. Before we finish up, we're just going to answer a few more questions from people who have been putting some in the chats. And the first one is from Sean Blaker, who's on Facebook. It says, do any of you feel that sometimes the conductor can get in the way of music?
Yes.
Brilliant question.
Yes. Yeah,
most definitely. And I think conductors need to be very, very aware. We said this when talking with David, that the conductors need to be very aware that you are a cog in the bigger picture. And I think we've all seen these conductors that are all hello and all this, and you don't, it's the subtle nuance, and it's the gesture, and it's the, you're, as I said in talking with right, your goal is to take that audience on a musical journey, and you're not there to get in the way. You're there as a vehicle. You're there as a guardian of a vehicle to say, right, I'm going to put you in the car and I'm going to take you on this journey now. So, if the conductor is getting in the way, then that can only be a negative thing from my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth saying sometimes less is better, because a great big downbeat like that sometimes is more disruptive than something that's just a lot more simple and a lot more clear.
Yeah.
The other thing I would add is if you separate the two disciplines that we talk about with conducting as well, you're rehearsing and you're performing in front of an audience. When you're in front of the audience, the worst thing a conductor can do is get in the way of the music, and getting out the way is exactly what you're aiming to do, and let the music come through. But sometimes in a rehearsal, actually it's then working out when is the right moment to get in the way of the music, to change your perception of or make sure the musicians are realizing your interpretation of that music, and helping them to realize your vision, and then knowing when to come back and get out the way again and let them sort of fly with what you've given them at that moment.
One of the final points, sorry, just on this, my camera doesn't seem to be working, apologies. Oh yes, here we are. One final other point, I think it's particularly valid when you've got sections which are more lyrical, and where you're really trying to encourage your players to express themselves, particularly soloists. You know, I think one of the worst things potentially a conductor can do is beat hell out of a section when you're encouraging someone to shape a phrase, you know, and then it can be really, really powerful, particularly in slower lyrical music, for the conductor to beat as little as possible. You know what I mean? And to indicate shape of the line or whatever. And if anything else, I mean, just to allow, you know, handing over, you remember the responsibility, of course, to shape the performance is not always from the conductor. You want to help develop your players' musicality, and stepping back when they're lyrical lines and melodic lines, particularly solos, is a great way, I think, of developing musicianship in your band.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to see if Louise is available to join us. She had a great question I think would benefit a lot from getting some feedback from all of you. So Louise, what was your question?
Hi, I'm from a really small village band. There's about 20 of us now, and it is slowly growing, and we're all about sort of grade 3 to 5, so we're really, you know, just beginners. It's like probably the worst school band you've ever heard, but we love it. So we were thinking of giving all of the players the opportunity to conduct one piece, but we're not sure if this is a terrible idea. Is it going to be too frightening? Do we need to impart too much sort of basic knowledge about conducting? Is it a useful exercise? I think we thought maybe it would help with timing and breathing and just understanding the constituent parts of a piece and all the different components that each section contributes. Sorry, bit rambling.
No, that's brilliant. And if you've got a band that everyone enjoys playing in, then it's a brilliant band.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
don't do yourselves down. But I think it's a brilliant idea to get people, particularly while they're learning, out the front to have a go at conducting. Not only might you discover somebody is a brilliant conductor that they didn't know about, but more you'll help your players to develop their listening skills. They'll realize what you're listening for in a band by being out the front. They'll hear a different blended sound, and so having a go however they want to communicate. If it's only to come out the front and have 2 minutes in front of the band, whatever they do, as long as they're trying to communicate something, is absolutely fine. If they don't want to go on and do a little bit more and they start to think about their technique, that's fine. But if all they're going to come out the front to do is start the band off and stop them, and they manage to do that together, but they actually then listen and start to really see how a band blends together and where they fit in as that tiny little cog as part of a bigger thing, then that's something really valuable for the players to do. And this is something I try and do with all the groups at various points that I've worked with.
Okay, so it's not a terrible idea. And we also thought our conductor comes under quite a lot of stick, so it might give them an appreciation of how hard it is actually.
That's in the conductor's job description, isn't it?
Yeah.
He is 83 though, so we need
You hit that section very well, didn't you?
I just want to bob in on this one. Just to add to that, I think there's lots of great reasons relating to part of the band and conducting why this is a great idea. But another really important one, which has been touched on in the Q&A, is from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, because I've heard a lot tonight about how people have been given an opportunity and that's why they've jumped in. So I think it's really, really important to make sure that we are opening up opportunities where we can. And this is the perfect way to do it, to show everyone in your band that this is something that they are able to do. Is a brilliant, brilliant thing to do, because with the best will in the world, what many of us see as conductors are white men, essentially, and that's the view that we're giving to our bands, that is what a conductor means. If we can give opportunities to everyone to stand in front of a band, it's absolutely something we should be trying to do.
Yeah. Very encouraging, thank you.
And Louise, just to add to what your sort of follow-up question there, there's lots of good reasons for people to learn more about conducting, even if they're not going to be a conductor. So if they watch, like people might, we aim tonight partly at those sort of people that want to know a bit more about conducting. And I've stood in front of a band before where somebody halfway through a rehearsal, maybe 6 months into working with that group, has put their hand up and asked me if I could do something to indicate the beginning of a bar. And at that moment, I realised there was somebody in the band that no one had ever told them that when you move your hand down, that signifies the beginning of the bar. They just thought you moved your hand at random to show beats, and there wasn't a particular pattern. So and to a certain extent, if no one's ever explained to you there's a pattern going on here, the fact that you're glancing up and down between music and that, you might never have noticed. And it's one of those things that we always assume people understand what a conductor's doing. So learning and having a go, or watching webinars like this, or reading a book, all those things make your musical experience better, whether you come and actually stand in front of a band or not.
Thank you. So double thumbs up for that idea then.
Yeah, many thumbs up. One final question before we finish up the evening. Joshua, are you there?
Yeah.
I
am. Okay. Yeah, so my question was kind of, in terms of the virtual banding things, do you think it's useful to have a conductor video on those? Because I can't tell if it's kind of, I'm torn between if it's kind of like more engaging or makes it more realistic to the audience, or if it's just kind of egotistic since you've got a click track in the background. So interested on opinions in this, without mentioning any names or anything.
Alan is raring to go on this one, so
sorry. Actually, as someone who did a couple of virtual band recordings when I was standing in the middle, like conducting at a camera, I can. I actually, like you, I'm in two minds about the whole thing. I think it depends what the purpose of your recording is. Actually, what's the reason for the recording? I mean, I kind of stood and conducted the camera on those recordings mainly because the band wanted to use it for promotional purposes. The big reason was they wanted to put a recording out to the local community to say, look, we exist, please come to our concerts. That was the kind of motivation. So they thought that having everyone in the picture and like me conducting would present the band as a unified unit, you know what I mean? So I mean, me standing had absolutely no musical purpose there at all, of course, in terms of the players playing in time. But in terms of presenting the band as, this is our band and this is the conductor and this is, come and get us in for come along to a gig. That was kind of the logic from that, to present it as a product, you know what I mean, as part of the visual performance, you know what I mean. But I absolutely, I mean, what you're saying is quite correct. You know what I mean? I've done a couple since, and I've not put especially ones for school. I've done some for my school where I teach, and I've not popped myself in those, but because I think nobody needs to be looking at me, But I mean, it's an interesting one, because I think it depends what the purpose of the recording is, and I can see the value in terms of presenting the band as here we are. This is us as a unit with our conductor. I do get why that visual aspect of the performance is part of the overall thing. I mean, for example, it's almost like arguing, what's the point of having everyone on Zoom in those boxes, making it imitate a Zoom call, and of course we all know that's edited, so it's an interesting one.
I think you're right there, Alan. The idea of the purpose of the conductor, I think, comes into it a lot. So if you are trying to tell a story, the conductor can be quite a useful tool in that video, where because they're not holding an instrument, they've got a bit more freedom to communicate with the audience in a certain way. But if they're just there to beat time and nod along, they're probably taking away from the performance more than they're adding anything. So at that point, you really need to think, why are you having a conductor in this?
Sorry. On one other point, of course, another great advantage of it, the personal benefit I got from that was being able to look at all my faults again as a conductor back on a camera after take number 4, and realizing that all the things I thought I'd battered out of my technique over years were coming back. So videoing yourself is a wonderful thing to do in terms of your in terms of looking back at yourself conducting. So unintended benefit.
That's a really good couple of points of stuff both sides I hadn't really thought of. So thank you.
Brill. Thanks so much for your question, Josh. Great. So before we round up tonight, we will, as always, be opening up the BBE pub after we close up the webinar. So if you want to stay on and carry on the conversation, it's been a while since we've had a pub, then do hang around after we've finished rounding up, and I'll bring you in so you can have a bit more of an informal chat afterwards, but we'll be saying goodbye to Facebook at that point. So just some final notes from me, really. If, because of this webinar, you want to become a member of the Brass Band Conductors Association, then just go to bbe.org.uk/join-us. You can find more information about how to join there. Membership is £44, and that includes individual membership of Brass Bands England, a professional DBS check, access to insurance deals, and discounts on Brass Band Conductor Association events. But if you want more information, want to find out a little bit more, then just email Rosie on member@bbe.org.uk. Make sure that you follow the Conductors Association. They're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram on Brass Band CA. And then a couple of short plugs about stuff that BBE have got going on. So make sure that you take part in the Brass for Brass competition. It's a free monthly competition. All you need to do is just fill out a quick form. It's just a very quick link. You can win your annual band's membership fee or prizes from Brass Bass TV, Band Supplies and British Bandsmen. And as part of this, BBE donates £25 to Brass for Africa every month. So if you want to take part there, there is the link, and I'm sure one of my colleagues will pop that in the chat as well. If you've enjoyed tonight's webinar, then I'm sure you'll be interested in some of the others. I know that lots of people have already signed up to some of the ones coming up. We've got a really busy event schedule in the next few weeks, it's fair to say. So on Monday, we've got a Facebook live stream. And that's an introduction to our new education youth programme, Introduction to Brass Foundation. So if you've heard about that, read a little bit about that, make sure you tune into our Facebook page. Our next safeguarding training is next Tuesday. Next Wednesday, we've got the webinar that was supposed to be our first one in the year that was rescheduled, and that's Back to Basics with Shona White. So if your instrument has been left a little bit over the last 6 months, this is a good chance to blow off the dust and start picking it up again. So Shona's going to be going through some tips on how to get started back playing after a bit of a break. Then the week after, we've got the amazing Alan Mazzuti, who's going to be doing a webinar. That one in particular, I expect to sell out. So if that's one that you're wanting to come to, I would suggest that you book that now. And then after that, we've got a webinar delivered by our new safeguarding officer, Sam Fisher, who's going to be doing a bit of an overview of general safeguarding and going through the National BOPA. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great to see you all and great to get back to the webinars. We've missed them over Christmas. I'm going to say goodbye now to everyone on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us.